we've built a really good system for global payments with stablecoins. The problem is that it lacks some kind of security and privacy. So we just want to solve that, right? So now, like if we are successful, like many other companies like us, we've achieved the actual value that we were promising in crypto, a decentralized, secure, transparent system for payments, which is more fair for everyone in the world. And also it doesn't mean that you have less privacy than even TradFi, because you have more and it's more transparent. So that's like my goal, right? Like clearly very simple, and it's not even Web3 versus Web2, it's for real humans, not for VCs.
Welcome to the Black Box Podcast, where we openly discuss how confidential compute, AI, and privacy systems work on the road to safe AGI.
Right. So thank you. This is the next episode of the Black Box Podcast. I'm Dylan, and I'm here joined by Peyman from Fairblock. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time today to come and listen to the episode about confidential crypto stablecoins and the future of how privacy and confidentiality kind of merge with stable coins. So Peyman, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's definitely a very exciting time to talk about privacy and confidentiality.
I usually like to start things off pretty broad so that we can narrow in on the central topic that we were just discussing right before we pressed the record button. And this is actually the main motivation behind your work. So the first question that I always ask everybody on this podcast is what are the three words that actually motivate the work that you do behind what you do? What are those three words that define private money and the experiences that you push to build Fairblock?
Mm-hmm. Great question. I guess the first word that comes to my mind is encryptable. So if I want to define it, it's like basically whether it's other bots, hackers, your competitors, your like coworkers or like organizations, governments, it shouldn't be corruptible. The system, the financial system for future shouldn't be corruptible. And whether it's like by those kind of people or even like bad actors that misuse a double usage of a privacy system, right? So like we really want to make sure that this is a system that cannot be corrupted, cannot be used by bad actors, not the real people, right? And the second word for me is always like products. I think there is a very huge gap between like what we are doing in research in like this kind of infra projects or like cryptography companies and the products, right? Typically people think of it as like, let's build like just a cryptography library on infrastructure and then there's developers or like we will handle it, right? But at that time, like they're either too tired or like they already launched a coin, they don't really care. So we are always trying to start with the product first and then coming up with the perfect solution for that product, right? And then you have the advantage of vertical integration. You have the front end, you can make the UX as good as possible, as simple as possible. Yeah, you control the infra like cryptography choice. So that's like always top of the mind for me. And the last thing is just making it painless. Because like outside crypto, inside crypto, like in Tor, in like VPNs, like privacy is always painful. You need to read it. You need to install a relayer, like a wallet, and like you need to give up watching cat videos on Facebook. So these are like the pain of using privacy. We really want to make it easy and fun, right? Like it's like just either it's really seamless, it's like painless, you don't even notice like in normal internet, or it's like fun, like you're using a game or an application that is really unlocked because of privacy in the first place.
I couldn't agree more, actually. And I've never heard anyone say this before. So to repeat, I heard incorruptible, product, painless. So that defines, at least for me, like how I would say that in my mind is that I have this indefensible and very easy way to build a product that is a stable product in a sense. And I think this aspect of stability and something that has sort of its own assurance as to its defensiveness, right? It's incorruptibility. And I love that you said that, actually. It's funny because I haven't heard that word in so long. And so I think that's a good way of putting it. So thank you for telling us that. The other question that I had, because stablecoins, they promise predictable value, right? And they But most of them, what they're doing is that they're leaking sort of their own behavior on a blockchain. And so, such as like who paid whom and how much did who
Exactly.
pay whom, and help, I guess, the world just understand, or actually just separate, like, what is legible stability, like a reserve. You have like redemptions, you have like whatever audits. There's like audits like that, and how I split it up, there's audits, and then there's like unnecessary exposure, like the user details that are private. But like, why do stable coins, I guess, you need confidentiality
Yeah,
for a user?
really good question. So I guess like the stable coins is basically, like, aside from Bitcoin, is like the actual product that just makes sense to most people, right? They use, like, it's heavily used in the whole world because of cross-border payments, day-to-day payments, especially like in Asia, right? And it's definitely getting more and more adopted in the US and like Western market as well after the Genius Act. And now that we like, a lot of people are using it these days because of how it's more fair, in the sense that you have a better yield, like you are getting some kind of yield back to the users compared to the normal banking system that, like, you don't really get the yield. The other thing is that now that part is a winning thing, right? But now we should think about like how we can actually use it other than like storage of value as a useful thing, right? If we are using stable coins to pay my contractors, to my employees, right? Does it really make sense for my employees to see how much we are paying the other employee? It doesn't really make sense for the very basic common sense reasons, right? It's not something that like North Korean hackers or a cypherpunk guy in New York fighting with the government is having privacy. It's like something that even like our grandparents like really get it, right?
I think that, and now we can
The
take it
other
even higher, right? The now grandma, grandpa, and your mom and the sister and the family, like everyone's data, for example, could be like at risk in that sense. So like now, like top
exactly
level risk, there is an even higher magnitude of like problems that entire institutions, I'm imagining, have to face in terms of their own identity. Is that correct?
Exactly. So I think there's like three reasons that it really makes sense. Like one reason is just like these are retail examples, right? Paying your friends, like, and your other friends shouldn't see like how much you're paying like to the other guy. That kind of reasons, right? Or like if you are buying something in Walmart using Walmart USDC, in future they shouldn't see that you are buying like, I don't know, Ben and Jerry's like 3 a.m. in the, like, these are some examples which are interesting, right? And
Get some peanut
yeah,
butter and
freedom
jelly
of,
at night. Yeah. Confidentially.
so that it just doesn't feel good for most people. They hate it and they get it. The other reason is for business, right? For business, it's either you are losing money, like you are losing money because your employees are seeing the like salaries of other people and they suddenly want to ask more, which is a good thing, but like most employers don't want it, right? A market maker, if they are leaking their activity on chain, their cash which is reserved on chain, they're definitely losing money, right? So like Cumberland specifically mentioned that they want confidentiality on chain because of market making, since they are not like privacy value like warriors, care about privacy because it helps their business. And most importantly, Amazon is not like the best guy in the world as a company, but they care about privacy as something that will help their business to survive, will compete with other people. Why? Because if the leakage of their merchants' data is like hurting them, they suddenly care, right? Because like other competitors can see, oh, like this kind of business suddenly is making a lot of money. Let's copy that part, right? These are like some examples that a lot of people will use it. Or VCs. VCs are not like necessarily like value driven people, right? But they use privacy because they want to sanitize their funds. They don't want to get copy pasted. Like we don't, like Paradigm doesn't want to see that, oh, like they're heavily invested in like Hyperliquid because of their addresses are known. So these are like some business money reasons that you need to have privacy. And I think the last reason is just like legal defensibility, right? We know like probably the biggest lawsuit in the history of mankind was GDPR lawsuit for Meta, Facebook, because of how they're storing users' private data, right? And I can assume that like with crypto, with like the new internet open rail for finance, it will become more important because it's money, it's finance, and also with AI, it will be even more highlighted. So I can assume that like with GDPR, can like California Data Privacy Rights Act and MiCA, like the Japanese Act, all of this stuff, the Clarity Act will push them to have some kind of privacy requirements before even going to market. So like Tempo doesn't really care about privacy because they're just launching a stablecoin chain, but like they have to have privacy as a US company because they don't really want to get sued, right? So that these are stuff like I think that business, retail, and just like legal defensibility is the reasons that like you really need to have confidential stablecoin.
Yeah, I heard that there was even new laws that were passed even in September, late September in just this last year, where Gavin Newsom actually passed a law on the auditability of even though that like the Genius Act was passed, there had to still be compliance rails over financial systems that are still, even if they're tokenized, they still have to be fair, or like they still have to be, they still have to be compliant. And so for a lot of these tokens that probably don't have maybe that integration yet, or like they don't have that kind of adaptability, then they're going to need this rail in a sense, I guess. Or is it a federated model, not changing the way that the blockchain and the crypto and the systems work now? I guess what's your approach on how to bring this technology into the token, I guess, that exists today versus the tokens that have not been created tomorrow? Is there a difference in how you approach this, or how do people approach this?
Yeah, I guess before that, like let's zoom in and talk about compliance in the sense that it's not just one thing, right? Compliance can mean making sure that your DeFi, it's not just about privacy protocols, right? Any kind of decentralized finance protocol is not touched by North Korean hackers, like maybe Russian government, and like not the favorite list of people. And any product should use like something like a pre-filtering mechanism with ZK or like other approaches that we know, or like KYC and KYB. That's like what the US law like is. I don't like. I'm not a fan of it or like against it, but that's like the reality, right? They should do it. It's not only about privacy projects. In the same time, when I say compliance, I think privacy is actually pro-compliance in the sense that the law is asking for it. Like it's like the company's responsibility to store the value of your like the data that your financial information in a private way, right? Exactly like GDPR. So without like privacy, you are not compliant, like on paper at least. And the other thing is that manipulation. Like if you build something that is not private, you as a company typically, because there's like centralized services or other people who are running your infrastructure, like validators, like block builders, they can, or sequencers, they can manipulate the ordering. Which is can be seen as market manipulation. We've seen it in a couple of US bills like already that talk about like manipulation of transactions in the same sense as TradFi. So I guess like privacy in that sense will make you more defensible and compliant as a US business, as an American business. In the same time, you need to make sure that like you're also not used by like other people to remain compliant as well. Main product is like confidential stablecoins, which is specifically used by like retail businesses for like transfers, for that kind of stuff that we just discussed. We have other products as well for like basically mempool encryption with like MPC and identity-based encryption. And these are just like temporary privacy in the sense that like you are committing to your transaction, you are getting like you are finalizing it, and it will get decrypted, but it will get decrypted once it's too late for manipulating them, for like reordering them, for like front running them, right? So it's a good way for users to not lose money, just not lose, like reason that you should have privacy is not losing money, it's not any other value. And for companies to really say that like even though we are running a roll up, we are running a chain, we are not really in control of like what's happening in the mempool. We cannot see like the information flow faster than other people and exploit it. So it's like I think legal defense in that sense as well.
Now, you're actually very technical, so I really want to ask the like sort of the step-by-step question, because I think it's so fascinating to hear real raw tech talk. And so can you walk us through from a request to some policy that you've instantiated to, I don't know, like a confidential execution to like whatever the attestation part is? Can you walk me through your process and how, I guess, the anonymity right? Or the protection is guaranteed. And there is your own sort of standard on this. And I would love the building blocks that makes this possible.
Yeah, I think it's very important to somehow differentiate between confidentiality and anonymity. And like when you like mix both of them, it's like we can call it privacy, full privacy, right? So what I mean by these are not the best terms that or like the most clear terms, but that's like standard vocabulary these days in crypto at least. Confidentiality means that the amounts of your transfers, amounts of your trades, your balances are confidential. A good example of that is like normal banks. Your normal banks, you have confidentiality with a centralized trust, but it means that your account, your balances, your amounts are not definitely leaked to everyone like all the time. It only happens if you are getting like audited or something, or like if your bank gets hacked, right? Because of the trust element. But by default, you are not losing your confidentiality or like in a dark pool in trading. And the other thing is anonymity. So like whenever we talk about something like Tornado Cash, or we are talking about something like Railgun or Zcash, that really the focus is on anonymity, right? What it means is that like you have an address, you are sending this transaction from this address to the other address. In some of these cases, like Tornado Cash, the amount is not confidential. You can actually see the amount, but you are breaking the link between this address and the other address. And which is a good thing in one sense, but in the same sense, it can be used by bad actors as well. And I think that's like one of the leading reasons of like confusions about like privacy in the crypto space and how non-compliant it is, right? So what we are really focused on in Fairblock by default is confidentiality. For some users who are like compliant and like valid use cases, we can offer anonymity as well as an add-on thing, but we are really focused on confidentiality because for something like payroll, you don't need anonymity, right? You want to make sure like everybody knows I'm paying my employees, but we want to make sure that um, their salaries are confidential, right? Or a payment network, for example, on Tempo. The way that it works for us is that you can get confidentiality in multiple ways. You can get it with a single TE, you can get it with MPC only, you can get it with TFH, you can get it with like homomorphic encryption, additive homomorphic encryption, and many, many other ways, right? Even with some kind of ZK, you can get it. And there's a lot of trade-offs in terms of performance and security. And like in general, I call the trade-off UPS because of the use case, what you really want to do, performance and security trade-offs. And for this very specific use case, we've basically implemented all of them and benchmark all of them. And like our approach is using homomorphic encryption because it's faster. It doesn't need like, I don't know, it's not just 10 TPS. Like we have like 1,000 TPS without any hardware acceleration today, which is good enough. And the other thing is that it's not relying on full ZK proofs on the client side. As an example, in something like Railgun, it may take 2 minutes, 3 minutes on the client side on your phone, which is a bad thing for UX. It's going back to the pain. It's not like as easy to use it. And on the TFHE side, there's sometimes like it's not really mentioned that often, but it's relying on a off-chain core processor, which is not succinctly verifiable. And with only homomorphic encryption, you have the luxury of like running it completely on-chain. So you are verifiable and performant, which is quite nice. And on the at least user side, you don't have a lot of pain of generating it. And comparing with threshold decryption approaches like for FHE or MPC, it's not based on honest majority assumption because it's P2P. You are just sending it to the other guy. Like I think it's like a very perfect solution for confidential transfers only, and we are using it for stablecoins. And it's a mix, like I call it a multimodal design because the actual thing, 99% of the values are coming from homomorphic encryption, but you still need like ZKP, a light ZKP to say that I actually have the balance to send this transfer, right? There's no way using MPC or FHE or MPC to just verify your inputs, right? So we are using range proofs for that, but it's much faster than a generalized big ZKP. And we are using like some other mechanisms like IB and MPC for the selective disclosure to make it compliant as well. But yeah, in general, that's like the flow is like you have USDC or fiat or USDT on any chain, on any EVM chain or Solana. You basically lock your tokens. We are not minting new tokens here. you lock it into a smart contract. A good example of that is like a casino. You put your cash or like other tokens and you
Right.
get the confidential version of. And then
Chain.
while you are in the casino or you are on chain, you can start spending it, and the other guy can also spend it. They don't have to withdraw it again at every time, right? And this way, like whatever you are doing, your actions, your balances, your amounts are confidential. And at the end of the day, at any time, at any part of that, the whole balance that you have, you can withdraw it, right? But the good, like the hopefully we can get it to a point that everybody accepts confidential stable coins and you don't really have to withdraw it like USDC. Like USDC in the early days, you had to withdraw it to USD because like it wasn't trusted that much, it wasn't used that much. But if you have a real confidential stable coin everywhere and everyone is using it, like that becomes the actual confidential like the USDC of those days. You don't need to even withdraw it to cash or USDC anymore.
Yeah, I'm curious about how that can actually evolve over time because where, these certain systems that do this type of processing, the scalability or even the reproducibility could potentially even be a challenge. Where TEEs and where also ZK and FHE and the other algorithms that you mentioned, now I better understand these systems and methods themselves while in some sense protecting and while utilizing private information so that there is a benefit to the actual cryptographic structure of what it is that you are doing, which is really fascinating because that, I guess, translates directly into stablecoin, like a full compliance rail. The individual needs to trust certain compute. So we'll keep it practical, like TEEs doing the confidential computing potentially, and then they're great for potentially like low latency guarantees for generalizing that. But then, like, why does the ZK part of this shine the most? Because you pieced a lot of it together, and I want to hear it from your perspective of like, if inside of Fairblock, where I guess like where do you lean the most on confidential computing for its like speed guarantees versus the ZK proving outsiders realistically they're the ones who are verifying those outcomes that are happening within confidential compute. So there is some sort of thing that you're doing without revealing the private data. So is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah. So when we talk about confidential computing, at least my personal definition is that it's the ability to compute over encrypted data, or at least like have some kind of like output of a computation without revealing the inputs, right? And you cannot typically get it with ZK because with ZK you can prove a statement about the data that you have or like the computation that you've done, which is kind of similar, but it's not exactly what we are looking for. But you can get confidential computing with TEs. Why? Because like whatever you are doing in the hardware is confidential and you can sign it, right? And which is simple. With MPC, MPC is not exactly like that, but you can secret share and data to multiple people and they don't know what they got. They can compute over it. They can compute the output, the function. So it's also confidential computing in that sense, and also FHE, which is like basically or homomorphic encryption in general, right? You encrypt the data and people can compute over that. So it's confidential computing. So there is like three approaches, and there is the performance and security and some kind of other trust assumptions kind of trade-offs for me. And even the usability, like the sort of the things that you can really do with these schemes. And so like, again, UPS, use case, performance, and security. And sometimes if you want to get a better solution, you can combine these two. Like, for example, you can combine TEs because they're just hardware security. They can break with physical access with MPCs because MPCs are honest majority, dishonest majority assumption. So you can do the MPC inside an TE. So in general, I think these are sometimes replacing each other. Sometimes they can make each other more stronger, and sometimes they're just solving some stuff that the other guy cannot solve, right?
I love that. I
In
love
our
that
case, for
creativity. I've really want to highlight that because I guess like we joked about it on the show before because we're like, oh, like who out here is actually doing ZKP plus FHE plus TEE plus, and then like that's like the perfect system. And then everyone's very one-sided on one particular solution, but I guess like how these solutions mix is uniquely drawing on what it is that you're trying to kind of compute over. So it's not necessarily like a meme that they're all mixed together. It's actually like there is a specific outcome why they are used this way. So besides those three, and like let's like besides the generalities, there's protocols that are potentially mixed into this too. And like like now recently there's like X402, and that's also like heavily being mixed now with payments with lots of attention. Does this like distract you, like, or does this is this make sense? Like, is that a part of the adoption of confidential payments? Because protocol seems like a more web 2 layering, but that seems it mixes in with what it is that you're sort of doing here with blockchain. Is that the web 3 ICO is actual protocol in web 2 for stable coins? I don't know, what is it?
the way that I think about the whole space is that instead of coming up with like a very complex solution that everything is bundled up together, or like just coming up with one solution and saying that like it will solve everything, like starting from the solution to the problems, we start with the problems. We see that there is clearly this problem of confidential stablecoins, and we try to solve it with as simple solution, like the simplest solution possible, right? The simplest solution may be homomorphic encryption, maybe just a T. And we see like there's this security problem with TE for these kind of users, or there is this kind of performance problem with like edge homomorphic encryption, fully homomorphic encryption, and come up with a solution. I don't think that in most cases, you don't really need to mix this stuff together, right? Because the clients don't need, the scenario doesn't really need that, but technically you can. And in many cases, it actually makes sense. For example, for us, we don't use TEs for confidential stablecoins. It's just only basic, and also it's not based on MPC assumptions. It's only based on like homomorphic encryption and math. And the performance is good enough. But for some applications like AI, so the reality is that any MPC or like whatever, like FHE or HE or CKKS or like no cryptographic library, whatever any company is saying is really there. It may, for like as an example, like for each token, it may take like 3 minutes for like a general query to a large language model. So it's quite high, and like the solutions are not that easy to even run. So for those kind of solutions, it makes sense to use GPUTs. It's not the best solution, it can break, but that's like the best thing that we have today. And you can use like other stuff like MPC to make it even more secure, but there's no other solution to use today.
Do you think unique provers, like the mathematical ones, like I love to joke about like mathematical labyrinths now that people are able to chat GPT their cryptography away? Do you find that there is some benefit in like the utility of AI now merging in with like how you strengthen and provide more like resistant sort of frameworks and infrastructure, or even post quantum complete solutions? I'm curious on how you think about that, because now that I feel like there's like a defense in depth that you're really, really achieving here. I guess like what are some of the decisions that you really consider when looking at Fairblock, like, but at the tech point of view?
Yeah, I think the quantum cryptography stuff, like, it's a separate topic, right? Because some of these schemes, for example, fully homomorphic encryption, some of them are really quantum resistant as well. Some of the elliptic cryptographic, curve cryptographic stuff that we are using are not. Like RSA also is not. I guess if we get to that point, we have like much, much larger problems, to be honest. Like the whole Bitcoin model can be broken, the whole internet can be broken, national security level of problems. And like we don't really care about the trading platform or like a game or like an AI input that we had. So yeah, I guess it's very important. I'm not sure if it's happening like in 10 years or 30 years, but it's probably not a problem to solve as a small startup for us. I typically just like we have some of our solutions are quantum resistant, and we tend to use them. if it's possible, but like the reality is like some of our solutions are not, and all of the other companies are like that as well.
But, like in terms of the decentralization of the hardware, or is that like a necessity, do you think, that like potentially Fairblock could have its own prover, like that could be accessible to access these systems in a fair and trust-based way that would be
Yeah.
sort of like a utility-based system?
Yeah, when it comes to provers, especially like ZKP provers, many companies, because of the client side delays, like just as like a third party prover to prove it, right? Which is kind of better than not having any privacy, but in the same time, you are trusting a third party prover and like just putting it in a TE, we are degrading it to the TE level. So like the ZKP side doesn't really make sense anymore. In our case, like since we got lucky and the ZKP side is like a lighter version that we can actually run it in your browser or in your phone. We are not really asking any other person to run the ZKP. It's happening in your phone or it's happening in your browser. So it's a real ZKP. But there is a problem, like in future, it's not really top of the mind for anyone, but ZKP, the math is secure in many cases. Even the math may not be secure these days, and it's not about quantum resistance, by the way. Like, for example, there is like the Reed-Solomon conjecture paper just like yesterday that questions a lot of assumptions. So you need to update the parameters, right? And ZKP can have bugs. ZKP can have like lower security than we thought. So we can do the ZKP potentially inside a TE if it's a really, really important application. And it's like, it's a trade-off. Like there is no such a thing as like God level privacy or security. There's always ways to bring it. You need to consider that like what's the real value that you're protecting. Is it the whole finance of the world, or is it just a game? And then you need to balance that. And I think that's like the very interesting part of what we are doing, and like the most confusing part of like what we should really do.
I feel
If it
like I totally understand, and I feel like it is a total mystery, but I understand to a degree, and I find it exciting because I totally agree that there is like a building block to what exactly it is that you're trying to protect, but then we have to question the assumptions on what systems and methods we are creating and also trying to implement safely. And like when we perform these tests on these systems, I guess like do you currently, like when you think about the thing that you're protecting within all of the systems that you currently have the most confidence in, because I think there's more things to be more confident about now, because I think it's pretty secure. And I totally agree with you that like we don't have to worry about quantum for quite a long time, probably, according to a lot of the people that I've at least talked to. And so, but now that I understand, like the user is going to have this artifact and it's going to be protected. So like the stable coin is also sort of like this natural Web 2 edge that I feel like a user can have this shared ownership of. So, like that's really where I feel privacy matters the most, because it's like ownership is the sense of, like ownership in that same degree, but like what you own, you don't necessarily need to reveal it to others before you want to, in a sense. Like I bought it and I don't want to show it, or maybe I made something and I want to hide it for now because I don't want to show my art, right? It's the same concept. So, but like, like in practice, like how similar, right, are these layers? How similar are the layers of the ZKPs that you're putting together? How does this apply to the Web3 method of doing this? Because, I mean, it seems like it's an improvement that could create its own payment rail versus the Web3 is just its own layer. So is there a difference, or is one needed in order for the other to kind of persist for some of this?
Yeah, I think like we can just make it very simple, right? What's the best thing that we can do is like a global system that you can send the transaction as simple as like a iMessage, like I don't know, WhatsApp message, right? And we don't have that yet with TradFi because you need to pay a lot of fees. It's not, I don't know, your message, your transactions can get lost. It's not that transparent. There's a lot of, I don't know, like moving blocks everywhere. So we've built a really good system for global payments with stablecoins. The problem is that it lacks some kind of security and privacy. So we just want to solve that, right? So now, like if we are successful, like many other companies like us, we've achieved the actual value that we were promising in crypto, a decentralized, secure, transparent system for payments, which is more fair for everyone in the world. And also it doesn't mean that you have less privacy than even TradFi because you have more and it's more transparent. So that's like my goal, right? It's like clearly very simple. And it's not even Web3 versus Web2, it's for real humans. It's not for VCs.
Yeah, real deployments though, and like in the past of what you've learned now that like you're right, like it's grown and it's succeeding, but like this is going to actually nurture new projects in the web 3 or the web 2. And I mean like there's sort of like a realistic nature to what's actually occurring and who finds the most value in this type of method, right? Because if the value is like on chain, but the utility is sort of within the web 2, like is there like a market opportunity that you think is not going to happen unless Fairblock steps in to provide a level of some sort of, I guess, like assurance that this liquidity has any kind of I don't know, trust over or trust assumptions around it? Is that like the kind of the key indicator that people are asking for?
Yeah, like we can see that like what's this like my point of view is that the current space in the liquidity in DeFi is very thin and like it's even getting like a little bit more questionable after like hacks and after hacks. And a lot of other applications that we have is like in the nature of speculative applications, like either which is like meme coins or AI girlfriends or NFTs. It's like short term, like we are not solving fundamental problems yet, right? Other than Bitcoin. But if you want to solve something with crypto and replace the older solutions that are not as good, we need to see like what are the standards for them today and at least meet the same standards if we are not improving them. So what are the standards today? In TradFi, 40% of US equity, like daily trades, is happening in dark pools. And if we are really talking about WA and stocks on chain, we need to have privacy for trading like stocks on chain. Whether it's like a crypto token, whether it's a tokenized real estate, tokenized stocks, we need to have the same guarantee, if not better, right? We are just making a decentralized trust instead of like the centralized trust that we have in dark pools. If you are talking about payments, P2P payments, we have to have the same assumptions that we have in like Venmo, right? Because even in Venmo, you can make it encrypted, right? Like not encrypted, but not show it to your friends how much you're paying other guy. Or like your bank accounts have it. Like in internet, if you're replacing the internet, old internet with a new internet, we need to have a little bit more of a encryption of your messages, right? So that's my goal. Like I think eventually, hopefully in like 30 years, 20 years, maybe only 2 years, we will replace the like TradFi. Like there's no questions. Like the current financial system is broken. The codes are not working. It's not efficient. There's no question that like internet can be better. There's no question that like a lot of Web2 companies are already becoming Web3 companies in that sense, like Stripe and many other companies. So it's already happening. And I think it's very obvious right now, more than any time in the past, that like we need to build like the same privacy and security guarantees that we need, like we already have, but just that is even good. We don't have any privacy today.
Wow. So that is, I mean, like, I'm not surprised that, it's finally coming out now, but like, privacy has not been so private as we have been told. So I think there is a truth to like how privacy and systems are adopted. And like, there was a phase where people were very excited about it. And then there was a phase where people got really scared. And I think just the nature of that technology alone has been so misunderstood that while secretly in the background you've been building Fairblock, that really just implemented it the way, practically speaking, the way it should be implemented, it seems. So this looks like a brain, by the way. It looks like a fairy key, but it looks like a brain too. So Fairblock has a really cool user flow. And so, this is the website. You can find it at fairblock.network. So it's a network. And, the like this network is going to unlock a specific shift, I think, in how users trust applications or even potentially AI. Because if an AI is going to be controlling payments or even like identity, or potentially any application is going to have local on-prem sort of tools and utilities based on whatever these learned systems do, I find your system to be a sort of like a transaction layer for privacy. But it's like it's a way in which, hey, you have created crazy complex DeFi rails, so this is a method in which you can sort of complement Web3 with a more secure sort of application. Is this an SDK that anyone can integrate? Is that how this works, or is this purely consultation based? Because some of this stuff is like nearly sort of, it's just going to take a long time. How is this integrated for most, I guess, like developers or like ecosystems or even enterprise?
Mhm. Yeah, it really. So first of all, it's an open network. Anyone can use our cryptography to build an application on like anywhere, right? And we would love to see it. And but like I'm really against like the general way of like launching chains and networks and projects in crypto, in the sense that you launch an infra or just a library and then like you expect that because of your airdrop or grant, like suddenly a lot of great projects will pop up in your chain. I'm more on the side that if you want to build a new city, like basically, like let's say you're building a new Dubai, right? So the government, like the actual people funding it, needs to build like the first shopping mall and the first best hotel in the scene, like, and bring some users and basically exposure to actual great developers rather than mercenary developers. And that's what we are doing, right? We are really we have the open network as a cryptographic computer that you can deploy applications, and it will take care of the cryptographic computations, including ZKP verification, homomorphic encryption, MPC, and all of that. But we are not just stopping there. We are building the confidential stablecoins applications. We are building trading platforms. We are building like even prediction markets or fun games. So people can see it, they can use it, we can get more exposures through our partners. We can distribute it. And in the same time, like these are all open source. If a developer, a good developer likes this, instead of just like following our docs line by line and getting confused by the math and the engineering, they can fork our application and build a better one, right? So like exactly how like there was Uniswap and a lot of people basically fork it, or there was Hyperliquid and they built the first application, but the general ecosystem is growing for them as well.
Yeah, I am like super fascinated because it's an ecosystem that like immediately warps you into, systems that are actually like fair. So that's like I'm sorry for the pun. I didn't even realize I just said that just now. But like it's becoming more and obvious to me like how this actually creates a almost like an open source market of trust, and open and like fair and auditable sort of systems. And when like when designers, or I guess like developers or teams, do they, I guess, like approach this as a way where like they don't have to work on something? Like, is there a design portion to how it all works? Like, do new systems apply to Fairblock, or how, what's the Mhm.
It really depends on what you are doing. If you are like, let's say, a payroll processor, like, or like a chain that wants confidential transfers, we've built the whole thing. Like you just need to submit your request for confidential transfers. So you don't need to like use our libraries or like integrate in that sense. You just use it like through our front end, or even maybe like through our APIs, like in the back end. But like you don't need to deploy any smart contracts or pre-compiles or like any kind of that kind of dirty work, right? But if you want to build like a new application, in the sense that you are building like a private perplex, or like we are using like it for an AI application, for a data privacy, private data market. So for this kind of applications that we haven't built it yet, you can use our libraries. You can use like, and you don't need to start from the cryptography level. You don't need to start from the infrastructure level. There is like a running infrastructure that we are maintaining it, and there is like patterns of like applications that we've already basically solved, and you can fork it. You can use the same kind of application that we've open sourced and tweak it to something that like works for your application as well.
You know, I just, as I was going through this, you probably have like dozens of different articles explaining all these systems. And so when I want to go and search, so I can go to the C apps. And as you were explaining this, there was this, I know the story, but I think you know the story a lot better than I do. So this is sort of like an underground story that I don't really think got a whole lot of attention in the public scene. So there was this idea that you could have an unruggable AI that's just like automated. Do you think this type of system is still being used for like actual protected agent, like DeFi agent related activities? Because the idea of this was called tee, as I remember, right? Like you could have a pet rock that's like basically it could sit, it could post, it could shit, it could do whatever you want, but it's unstoppable, meaning like unless you were administrating the system, there was a way of deploying this like sort of like agent on a contract in a TEE. And you guys had done something that was really interesting where you sort of proved that the agent can be trustless. And is that like that kind of agent AI architecture, like just the concept of loan of trustless AI? I don't really see a lot of projects implementing this or having some knowledge over the concept. So how do you sort of think about this?
Yeah, I guess like AI agents in general, they're not adopted even outside crypto yet. There's like obviously like ChatGPT have AI agents and like it's not that fast or popular yet, but I think like the concept of AI agents is definitely the future because like it's just like you can do more complex things and more companies and more people will use it in the near if you follow academia, like most of the work in companies and like universities are really working like focusing on AI agents. In crypto specifically, I'm interested in AI agents for trading, not in the sense that they will make you like, I don't know, millionaires overnight and that kind of a stuff, in the sense that let's say you're a DeFi protocol, you want to like auto balance something, you want to control your portfolio, you want to have like optimize some certain stuff when you're getting like yields from multiple vaults. So for that kind of stuff, I see there is like some kind of uh, let's say like in normal words, we have managers for our portfolio and we pay them like 1%, 2% to manage our portfolio. So I guess like those managers are not that great and it makes a lot of sense to have an AI agents to control it. And if you are using AI, the question is that like, is that AI agent like fully trusted or not? There's a very real risk that we can even see in the recent weeks, even in the OpenAI's browser, that these AI agents are basically exposed to some kind of security threats with like prompts. And if you get that prompt in your browser, in your OpenAI browser, in your AI agent, they can have access to your private keys and that kind of stuff, right? So anyone listening to this, don't use OpenAI for your like trading stuff because there's like prompt injection attacks as well. And so I guess this is like we are not still there, but I think with the pace of the things and how fast the space is changing in the AI and trading space, we will definitely get there. And the context of our work with Phala Network, which that like they had, like we didn't build the AI agent ourselves. They built like a very interesting AI agent in a TE. So the TE is inside AI agent. Basic AI agent is inside a TE and it's like protected in that sense. It's unstoppable in that sense. But there is a problem with TEs that if the TE goes down suddenly, and what happens to your private key? If you like if you haven't back it, there's no backup, right? There is like a huge like technical discussion, but the TLDR of that is that we've built a very interesting mechanism that if the TE goes down, there is no health signal. And if the health signal is basically non-existent on the MPC network, only at that point you can submit a request. And as the owner of that TEAI agent, you can recover your private keys and everything. So it's more of a security mechanism, like reassurance that like you're not fully trusting the TE technology.
Excuse me. So yeah, wow, I didn't think of it in that way where you can sort of enable a level of governance over the TEE then, it seems. it seems like the AI could even assist in doing that. Is that sort of the idea?
Yeah, I
Hard.
guess the AI part is that, like, yeah, like, and what we did with MPC and TE, like, is like one application of TEs, which is AI agents. So the main point of that is that is a security mechanism. If the TE goes down, like, you can recover your private key with MPC and like identity-based encryption, as simple as that. But like, it's more important for like AI agent and trading applications because they have access to like sensitive private keys.
Got you. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Now, like, really seriously, thank you for going over all of that. That's like the key point that a lot of like founders that want to know where to start. That was a really good place to kind of get your toes wet with some of the most, like, I think even the most seriously built out, production ready projects that are out there. And it's hard to kind of get a good start with a lot of these things. And I think that's a really good ecosystem to kind of look at, to understand more about. And I was just exploring with a lot of it with automata, and you also, there was like lots of other systems that are out there. So any other systems that you're actually excited about? Because I mean, I do my own research on a lot of different work. I mean, it's so hard to keep up with everyone's stuff, but you have like such
Yeah.
a big repository of it. But I guess what projects out there right now are exciting you the most, that like I guess like you're in collaboration of, and they're open source and they're hot, they're fresh, or maybe they're just like a sleeping giant that is just like needs just more attention in terms of its support, because
Yeah, yeah.
it seems like the community can really help enable a more secure, sort of more beneficial way of layered security as you're kind of thinking about
Yeah.
this.
Other than our main focus, which is confidential transfers and stable coins and that kind of stuff, or like dark pools for trading, there's a very interesting thing that we are also working on, which is uh, sealbit auctions, and I call them leaderless auctions because, like, typically when you have an auction, there is an auctioneer which is centralized or whether it can get hacked or it can go down or they can silently manipulate the auction results. And it's heavily used in DeFi, in like finance, in like real world, and for all kind of auctions. But we find a very interesting way of a paradigm has a good article about that, as you see there. But like, we have a very specific protocol, fair rates, which is, we have built like a lending based protocol. Sorry,
Fairy
fixed term
rates.
lending protocol. Fair rates, fair rates. It's on our
Gotcha.
caps. It's a second application. Yeah. Um,
It's by Fairblock, and this is the network. Oh, this is actually a React app right here. Is this it?
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, very
So
cool.
this is one application. Yeah, it's just one of the applications of auctions. And basically it's completely on-chain. So there's no off-chain element here. And it's still in the demo stage. It's not like completely functional. That's like why I brought it up, like for community help or like our next focus. But yeah, we are using identity-based encryption, MPC, and all of that. And the real reason for that is that at the end of the day, you can get better rates. You can get like 2%, 3% better rates than Morpho because of it doesn't have slippage, right? As simple as that. Uh, because of the game theory. So it's like one
Interesting.
of the exciting examples that privacy means money, or yeah, it means like getting less manipulated, and privacy doesn't mean anything around like the things that we've seen before. It's very different kind of privacy.
I haven't totally dived too far into that world, but this is really just like seems like a very broad and accessible and highly efficient way of auctions in general, where they can be sort of processed together, and very efficiently they could be processed together. It seems like sealed, meaning that everything is encrypted end to end, like from like who sees what, so there's no sandwich attacking, there's no potential MEV, like any off-chain to on-chain aware driven, solicitation of the service, right? Like everything end to end is serviced. I guess like no more copy trading,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like I can't do
The
that anymore.
sealed part is that the bids are encrypted, and the leaderless part is that there's no auctioneer, so no one can really see your bids, even the auctioneer. And a good, like, other than lending, that we've built fixed term lending protocol with that on Arbitrum and soon on Hyperliquid. there's like other applications as well. For example, in CalSwap, like we are actually like collaborating with them, and they have like a centralized auctioneer for intent matching. And it's kind of still bit because like is we are just trusting the auctioneer and like they're not linking with each other, but it's not encrypted in that sense. And they're actually working to bring it on chain and get rid of the centralized auctioneer. Or like we can see the other kind of auction mechanisms for intent matching like all over the place for even options protocols, Uniswap. Uniswap X is also auction based, and you can use this kind of mechanisms to prevent like front running. Because even in Dutch auctions, there's still ways to have MEV. Like even theoretically, it's not possible, but since it is deployed on a blockchain, you can do certain attacks on top. We've done another thing with CalSwap. If you want, it's FairyCal on our caps page on our website. You can find it. It's like a separate website with CalSwap, and that's for encrypted intents. So your intent can get encrypted, and while it's waiting for execution, like a limit order, while it's waiting for execution, the amounts are not leaked. But after execution, it will become public.
Got you. Okay, protected intent. Yeah, the intent-based systems that are coming, they are also getting some attention. Like how do you wager? Because I've only heard of a few, like the ones that are off the top of my head that I know that like from the Phala perspective that we work with a lot is like the intents from the near shade agents. And then there's like Anoma. They also have like an intent-based architecture. So is like intent and intent based matching sort of like a new thing, like, well, a more sort of like let's call it more efficient, I guess, like more protected
Yeah.
method of doing crypto in this
So
way, because like it
when
seems
we are
like it's
talking
just
about intents are just like a buzzword, to be honest. And when we talk about like intents, we are typically talking about different products. So there's things like across, squid, there's like deep bridge, there's near intents. And when we are talking about that kind of intents, it's cross-chain transfers. And so specifically, I want to send this much amount of money from this chain to the other chain, right? And there is like other kind of intents, for example, CalSwap today or Enoma like isn't in like they've talked about intents, but their first product that they're launching is not like intents really, but like it's in the roadmap. And it can be both. Like they are talking about cross-chain part, but first they're starting with this uni-chain like transfers. And so with that distinction, I think when we are talking about cross-chain intents, privacy can be important. Why? Because I'm saying that I want to send like 100 mils from Ethereum to Hyperliquid. And typically there's a lag, and if you see that from this address there's a transaction coming up to on the other chain for and potentially for buying that coin, you can front run it, right? So it's good to basically encrypt it, at least have some kind of pre-execution privacy, commit to it and decrypt it right away, so there is no other players who are already with liquidity waiting on the other chain to front run your acts. So that's the reason that we can have this kind of privacy for cross-chain intents. And we are working we've explored it with teams like Axelar or Union. And there's very interesting ways of getting the confidentiality of the amount that you're sending and also the addresses that you're interacting with. And the other side for the thing is for the Unichain intents. I think for that is for the same reason that we are working on confidential transfers or trading because of front running protection, just simply not leaking your activities to other people as a company, as a person, as a trader, and for all of those good reasons. And typically it means you're not losing money. You are not getting exploited to the max with the slippage or like by your competitors. And these are more on the privacy side of the intents, in the sense that your intent is private and other people cannot see it. There is a very interesting distinction here that you can have public intents, but in the same time, you can still use privacy in the protocol. Why? Because there's intent matching side. So solvers can compete with each other with privacy. So like, for example, in the auction that I talked about, the bids of those solvers can be encrypted so they can compete in a better way with each other. And at the end of the day, bring better rates to the end user. It improves the execution quality in that sense, but the intents are public, right? So I say I want to send 2 Ethereum from this chain to the other chain, and everybody can see that. But there's like some solvers who should compete with each other, and those solvers can privately compete with each other with encrypted bids in an auction. And since it's encrypted, it means like the there's better competition for smaller players, like for you are incentivized to bid correctly. There is no front running slippage and that kind of a stuff. And it means that with more competition, better rates for end users. And then
And
obviously you can combine field bid auction with private intents as well. So I can have both as well.
wow, so I could provide an intent to the auction, which is effectively kind of expecting it, and then it matches these intents. But then there are ways in which there is like an economy of who's actually picking up these bids because they have some value to them actually being selected and placed, right? In that order.
Exactly.
So like there's like a
Yeah.
new type of fee in the intent-based execution because I feel protected that everything that I've done here on my computer, if they cheat, then they're slashed. Is that the idea? Because like if they don't resolve it, like like how do they cheat in this game?
Let's work on an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a good example of an intent is that I'm sending, like I want $2,000, $3,000 osmosis, like a Cosmos chain, and I have like 1 ETH on Ethereum right now, right? So you express your intent for that. You express that I want $3,000 or like the same ETH on Cosmos. I have one ETH on the other side, right? So that's like the thing, right? So the first problem is that if we publicly shout that, people can understand your intentions about like why you are going to the other chain. For example, if a big VC like Paradigm is using an intent protocol, everyone can see that, oh, like they are going to buy Hyperliquid, right? So let's front run that, right? So there is a natural reason that you need privacy for your intents itself. And that's like a separate topic. So that's the first tab. Now let's open the second tab, right? Which is assume that your intent is public. Everyone knows your intent. Like you are saying that, like, I want 1 ETH on Cosmos, I'm paying like 1 ETH on Ethereum, right? So what there is naturally a market, right? There's a competition for those players named solvers to actually execute it for a fee, right? They pay you the 1 ETH on like the other side. They prove it to the solver the intent protocol, and they get the funds gets unlocked for them in the source chain. So in that say, like they are getting like a better rates, like maybe they're charging you 1%, there's a fee or something, right? So they're naturally competing with each other. And in some of these mechanisms, they're using an auction mechanism. So you can make sure that, like for example, in CowSwap, you can make sure that those like solvers are doing the best that they can, right? They're not like exploiting you. They're saying that it makes sense for me until this point. This is my bid for executing your order. And there's like another solver like Wintermute coming in, and they compete with each other. So if it's sealbit, it's a sealbit auction. Game theoretically, they're more incentivized to bid the true value. And if they bid the true value, it means that smaller players can also have a um, share of the market, and there's better competition. It's a little bit of more of an open market. In the same time, an open market, more competitive market, less exploitative market means better results for end users. So instead of like executing your intents for $10, they will execute it for $1. And naturally, now we can combine these private two tabs: privacy for your intent and privacy for their bits. So like you can have them both, but it doesn't mean that like you should have them both.
Do you think that there's a problem with the fairness value or in such how solvers in bids and the auction and how this is all taking place where, you know, other solver and other auction mechanisms want to interoperate? Maybe they have each other's bids or they want to share bids, because is that the new marketplace where data has this type of tag and labeling where that becomes the new sort of auctioneer data economy of like, you know, somebody, I don't know who wants this intent, but like I don't have it, but I have it, and who wants it? So do you think there will be bidders of even the bids themselves? Is that like where we're seeing this, or is this not the vision?
So you're asking about like those people who are bidding for the auction for the intent. They like I didn't get the question, to be honest.
I guess you know, because this is such a you know, people are bidding and solving in a sense, is that like one resolves without, you know, one without the other, they cannot resolve. Like, it seems like there has to be this sort of matrimony, and then that is why they require the confidential compute, because then they can't cheat. And so I'm trying to understand how other competitors like fare against that type of system, because are they applying to become a solver or even becoming a bidder? Because if you extend those two markets and they are two separate markets, but they are used together, how do you
Yeah, that's
see?
a
Yeah.
reality already. That's a reality already. Even before confidentiality, you can see that in CalSwap has like significantly better rates. They're less exploited than like some other projects, right? And it's better for users. And some of those like solvers are, it's not the best for those solvers, right? Because like they're making less. Since it's a better product, even the Trump family was using CalSwap like last year, right? So there's a natural balance in the sense that if your product is better, you are getting more fees, you will get more orders. But on each order makes you less, but it's better for you to be in that system with more users, right? So like economy of a scale thing than like having you're making $1 per for thousands of transactions or one transaction, but $100 from one transaction, right? So that's like the trade-off here. And you can already see that like in CashSwap, sometimes there's no one to execute the transfer. They just submit it to Uniswap, right? But not all of the transactions are executed by solvers in CashSwap. Like maybe like half of that is going to Uniswap because it doesn't make sense for solvers as well.
It's the ability of having the decentralized liquidity that is in CowSwap have then this, oracle that it then gets to allow its users to create these encrypted limit orders, or whatever they couldn't necessarily do on chain, where they probably would get cheated out because of the fact that it's a limit order. That means it's posted, and then you're right, like that's the problem with seeing this overall, like for the user, or actually for the audience of this entire thing, that the problem with what this solves for is that the data would just be public on the chain anyway. But don't you get that? Isn't that problem sort of resolved on privacy based chains anyway? Sort of like, you have systems that basically make zero knowledge proofs of inputs to the chain, like provers. And so, like, I'm curious
So it
if
also yeah, what I talked about CashSwap, like CashSwap doesn't have privacy right now in that sense. So I was talking about like since they have some kind of MEV protection mechanisms without privacy, this is already happening for them. Like that's like what the reality. And with confidentiality, you will get more of that, right? So with confidentiality, your intents will get like less exposed like to anyone, but the solvers still need to have some access to that, right? So there's two solutions. It's either you only choose to leak your intent to a certain set of solvers, not publicly to everyone, but solvers can only see it, so they can decide if they're executing it or not. Or you can run it in a TE or MPC or FHE, so they can run their algorithms and conditions for executing an order in like with confidential computing, so they can exactly see what they're doing, but they cannot like cheat in the system. But there is like a very natural trade-off here is that the more that you see, the more risk that you can take. So sometimes like confidentiality in that sense may also not be the optimal reason for having solver system, right?
I
But
see.
in general, like the explainable way of solving, like for solvers, for a big economy, if there's a lot of transactions, it makes sense that like you're running it in a confidential computing way that it's not open to that kind of manipulation.
How does AI solve, or how does AI even perform this type of machine learned algorithms that you're talking about? And is there a benefit to it at all? Is this research that you see anyone attempting?
Yeah, I think AI can definitely maybe help with like training better solving algorithms, so they can get like, I don't know, in average they can make like more profits. But yeah, something that I was really interested like this week about AI is that we had the balancer hack this week, and this is like a very a special case because like previously all of the hacks, it was like FTX or like Bybit, and it was like a selling point for DeFi. It was saying that like it was hacked. You know what? Because it was a centralized exchange, right? That's why we need a decentralized exchange, right? Or that other smart contracts gets hacked. You know what? Because it wasn't audited properly. It was a low quality team, right? But in this case of Balancer, things are a bit different because Balancer is one of the most respected long-term companies in the space, and their smart contracts are around for a while, and it's a DeFi protocol on it, and it has affected like the most secure chains like Ethereum. It's not random chains. Um, and they've been audited multiple times by like Trail of Beats and like the top auditing companies. So I think this is like a wake up call for a lot of people in DeFi, and then they're taking out their liquidity from DeFi. And I was thinking about it, and the last problem, just a problem statement, is that the code looks to be AI generated. Some part of the code seems to be vibe coded because there's like some kind of logs and comments in the code itself by the hacker. And this raised the question for me that like it's not crazy to assume that people are training more and more scanning algorithms so they can always 24/7 scan the whole blockchain and look for general patterns like typical problems in smart contracts and try to hack them all the time, right? So I think that's really not something that we can solve with auditing more and more or being like more careful as humans or auditing committees, because the incentives are not like that. And there's a non-security basically idiom in the security researchers circle that like if you look close enough you will find a bug. And the reason that Apple is secure as a company is not that they're the best security engineers or the best company. They're bulletproof. That the reason is that Apple is not really an open system. So like it's very hard in the first place to take a look at their code. Or if you hack them, it's very hard to take all of the money and run away like globally. So I guess that's like a very good selling point from privacy from a very new angle, in the sense that if you have a privacy chain or private smart contract or private transfers, it's not really easy for hackers to run those AI algorithms or attack it because they don't really know like what's the code. It's not that easy. That's like one of my wild guesses these days is that with like the growing interest in the privacy space with projects like Zcash, like Fairblock. There's a bunch of good projects, Arcium, Phala, I don't know, Aztec, like Alia, all of these projects are great. And I think there will be like more and more traction because of this, how we are getting more serious about security and institutional adoption to have this kind of privacy preserving chains or smart contracts or not in the sense that the transactions should be definitely private in the sense of ideological reasons and cypherpunk values, in the sense of building something that is trustworthy for users and for businesses to use in the first place.
I really thank you for just like deep diving into this. I think this is some of the most like important sort of things that we have to be focused on, especially now that AI is getting so much better at exploiting.
There is no real secure system. That's like the truth. You can always make things more expensive and harder and more obfuscated. But like if there is enough like financial incentive and there's like the bar is lower in terms of technology and compute, there is AI or like more interest, more eyes on your code, there's like lots of ways. And the reason is like there's always 10,000 ways to really destroy a system, and like a really good security engineer maybe have the most creative like expert can maybe think of like 9,099. So I think the real secure ways is like if you have like things like DeFi that is securing like 1 billion, 2 billion like of asset in your smart contract, there's enough eyes. AI is making it easier. It's not going to automatically attack it. It needs experts, but it's making their job much, much easier. And we don't have legal protection in that sense in crypto, because if you get hacked, you just get out. And like that's not the case for like many other like companies, unfortunately or fortunately. And yeah, I guess like you can just make things like harder and harder. Try to not expose your smart contracts, you expose your things. That's like why I'm bringing up a solution, like more of a not even showing it to like hackers with a privacy preserving smart contract instead of or like running it in a TE. It's a very, I think, untouched board. There's like a couple of teams like Aztec or like Secret Network in the past that have basically, I think, explored these contracts, but there's a lot of challenges with them as well. But I guess that's like the real like way of like Apple way, not showing like the whole system completely open with very, very high in computational power and almost no consequence of trying to attack it, and basically just go for it. If you hack it, you get like $1 billion, and that's like the solution right now.
It's so fascinating. I think it's honestly that it's going to be the thing that we have to change now over the next couple of years. And thank you so much, Peyman, for honestly like having so much knowledge on the topic. I think just so many people want to be security aware, but it's like so hard to explain, and you did a wonderful job of breaking everything down, and like you're very good at articulating a lot of it. So that's so helpful on how we can, my perspective on like the intent-based systems using private and confidential processing in order to kind of build out unique operating systems and methods to execute DeFi properly, or just in a fair and more federated way while still remaining decentralized, is sort of my key takeaway. And I think it makes a lot of sense why now, like, there's like the Web3 has this Web2 ICO. And it's like by mixing these systems or by utilizing these systems in a way where it merges information, not mixing, but merging, so that it creates these very secure outcomes, I think is the next step in like how we think about secure tooling in fintech, or even how we think about secure launch of any kind of data or artifact that's like, whether it's on chain or off chain. That's how I think about it. So the most exciting thing over the next 5 years, Peyman, what like is gonna be the thing that you think is gonna change the most for you, and what is the thing that you are prioritizing now that people should know about?
Yeah, we are definitely prioritizing like basically our confidential stablecoins and transfers, and trying to get like as much as real clients and like partners as possible for that product. And I think we've done a good job so far, but there's still a long way in terms of like launching a very successful product and getting mainstream adoption. So I'm super excited to explore that path. In general, for the space, I think the most important problem that everyone should think and try to do something about it is the problem of trustworthiness and credibility, whether it's like affiliation with bad actors, whether it's like all of the rug pulls, or like something that happens like suddenly a liquidation day on like, what was that, the 10/10, like 10th of October last month, and nobody knows like what is the actual silence reason behind the liquidations and how the whole thing market makers broke in a single day. I think there's a lot to work on in terms of privacy, security, price discovery, the whole mechanisms, oracles, like infrastructure, and like sort of the actors who are even contributing to blockchain space, to get to a point that like we've built like the new internet that can be trusted. So far, I think we've done a pretty good job in terms of technology so far, but in terms of branding and building trust and credibility for a normal user or an institution or a big company, we've done a pretty bad job. Unfortunately, I think the next 5 years is about building trust.
Let's make a more free and fair economy. Let's shout it out. So thank you so much, Peyman,
Thank
and
you.
awesome message. And we appreciate your thoughts on all of this. Take care.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to Blackbox. Want to bring a guest or yourself on the show? Visit blackboxpodcast.com and apply. Please leave your email and best contact and fill out the short form. We review every submission and plan episodes carefully, and our media team will reach out with pre-interview questions.